Hello, Four States listeners. This is Roberta Foster, and welcome to today's edition of the Author's Corner, brought to you by KNEO 91.7 FM, The Word. And today I welcome Johnnie Alexander to Author's Corner. She's written the book, The Cryptographer's Dilemma, which is published by Barbour Publishing, and she'll tell you more about how to find the book at the end of the program. First, a little bit about Johnnie. And she is an award-winning, best-selling novelist. She serves on executive boards for Serious Writers, Inc. and the Mid-South Christian Writers Conference. She co-hosts Writers Chat and interviews other inspirational authors for Novelists on Wine. And Johnnie lives just west of us in Oklahoma, so thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited to talk about the book and chat about stories.
Well, this is the first of a new series about World War II heroines. So how did you get interested in World War II events enough to write this book?
Oh, wow. Well, that goes back several years. I used to live in Florida, and I was wandering through my little small-town library and found a book called Hitler's Soldiers in the Sunshine State, where I learned that we housed Nazi POWs,
wow.
Not just in Florida, but in different places throughout the United States. And I'd always wanted to write a book, a novel, but, was a little bit scared to do so. Wasn't sure how to go about it. But that idea just stuck with me. And I wrote a story about that. It's not published, but that led to writing my debut novel, Where Treasure Hides, which is a World War II story. And then I've written a couple others since then, and was very blessed to have Barbour pick up my proposal for The Cryptographer's Dilemma. Just one thing about World War II led to another. I got interested in the art theft, about how families and Christians hid Jewish children during the war. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, eventually that led to code. So it's just one thing after the other. There's so much in World War II to discover and to write about.
Well, you mentioned the word code, so that's kind of an integral theme in the book. And so, but you have a character in the book that maybe you can introduce us to called the Doll Woman.
The Doll Woman. She is a real person. Her name is Velvalee Dickinson. She not only collected dolls, she had a doll shop on Madison Avenue in New York City. But before that, she and her husband had lived in California, and he was a produce commodity broker, and he worked with Japanese farmers from that area, and she was just enthralled with Japanese culture. She was a very small woman, and she would dress in kimonos and, the traditional Japanese garb. She had Japanese friends in very high places, both in their military and in the government. And she just loved that culture. So when World War II broke out after Pearl Harbor, the Japanese approached her and paid her to provide information to them about the ships that had been damaged at Pearl Harbor and their repairs and when they would be going back into battle.
Oh. And
she did. She agreed. She did it.
So am I understanding it correctly? She was working for the Japanese, basically our enemies at the time?
Yes. She is considered like one of the first women traitors, or the only woman traitor of World War II. Yeah. It's a very interesting story. And when I came across it, I was so surprised because by this time I had been researching different aspects of World War II for, like I said, a decade or more, and had never heard of her. And when I came across her, it was just like, oh, wow, this is pretty phenomenal.
Wow.
And so I pitched the story to Barbour, and they took it to be the first of a series, which was really cool.
Wow. Well, again, you include something that probably most of us know nothing about, and that is code writing. So give us just one interesting aspect of writing code.
Well, she wrote letters, and because she was she had a clientele throughout the whole United States and even international. Right. So they set it up that she would write what's called jargon code. So the letters look like she's writing about dolls, but instead she's writing about ships. And just to give a very brief example, in one letter she says, I have 3 lovely Irish dogs, and one of them is a fisherman with a net over his back. And Codebreakers decided that she was referring to an aircraft carrier because they have anti-torpedo netting on their sides.
Okay.
And then she mentions an old woman carrying wood, and that was an older battleship. But the most interesting one was she talked about the third as a little boy, and then she goes on to say, you had sent a letter to Mr. Shaw. I want to see Mr. Shaw. He destroyed your letter. Well, there was a destroyer, so she writes, destroyed your. She misspells the word destroyed. She capitalizes the word your. If you put those words together really fast, it's destroyer. And the USS Shaw was a destroyer. It was in dry dock at Pearl Harbor, had been damaged there. And about 2 weeks before this letter was written, it was undergoing repairs in San Francisco. So she says, I know he's been ill, but they say he will be back to work soon. So she's telling them that this ship will be, put back into battle. So there were these kinds of just these letters, and what she did was she typed the letters, but she would forge a customer's name to them. And there would be things in the letter that sounded like they came from that customer, things that she knew from her correspondence with that person. She used their address as the return address on the letters, which were mailed to an address in Argentina. And those people had moved, and they had not told Velvalee that they had moved, the people she was supposed to be writing to. So these letters started coming back. And then the FBI. And so this woman got this letter back that she knew nothing about, turned it over to the Postal Service, and then other letters. So by August of 1942, the FBI had 5 letters supposedly written by 4 different women that Velvalee had written. And so that started the investigation into finding out who was writing these letters, which led the FBI to her.
Okay. Well, there's lots of intrigue and lots of historical information obviously being provided in this book called The Cryptographer's Dilemma, written by Johnnie Alexander and published by Barbour Publishing. Well, we are a Christian radio station, and so you also include a Christian faith theme in your book. So tell us about that.
Well, in this one particularly, there was a part of the book where I needed to have a coincidence happen. And, you just can't have coincidences happen in stories and fiction. But somehow, God is so good about this, because things will get set up and I won't even realize it until later in the story. And then it's like, oh, I already got that. But before I reached that point in writing the story, I had already made coincidence kind of a theme, because I have my FBI agent and his uncle, who's his boss, talk about coincidences. There's no such thing as a coincidence. And so when this coincidence happens later, I'm able to bring that as there are no coincidences. God engineers our circumstances. He engineers things that happen. He engineers those circumstances, which, of course, is, if you're familiar with Oswald Chambers' book, My Utmost for His Highest, that is a theme that he brings out in those devotionals again and again and again, that, God is in charge of our circumstances, whether it seems like a coincidence or not. So that ended up being a theme that fortunately I had laid the groundwork for without even realizing it. And then it became a deeper theme as the story progressed.
Well, and I'm sure that inspires people as they look at their own life and see some of the circumstances that come together, and maybe even helps, as we read your novel, helps us to realize that God is working very much in each and every one of our lives too, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, I'm just so blessed by the stories he gives me to share with others. Yes.
Well, did you identify with any particular one of your characters in your book?
Oh, wow. I'm a little jealous of Eloise, because she gets to travel across the country, not just once, but twice by train. And that is something I have wanted to do for a long time. I have been plotting those Amtrak schedules, and looking at where they go. I've got to do that in Europe. My sister and I went to Europe, and we traveled by train for a whole week just from one city to another, which was fabulous. I would like to do that something like that here and haven't. So her love of travel, that is something I identify with her. My favorite character not a favorite character, but one of the fun characters for me to write was one of the women. These were real women, but I did change their names for the story because I wanted to make them my characters, not, worry about who they were in real life. And so one of those women turned out to be like just really fun for me to write. She's just an ordinary person, but she had spunk and a mind of her own, and she was not intimidated by this FBI agent showing up at her door, so that's kind of fun just to write those kinds of characters that sort of, they're just a minor character, but they sort of take off and take a life of their own and almost take over the story.
Well, The Cryptographer's Dilemma is actually the first book in your Barbour's Heroines World War II series. So what's coming up next?
Well, there will be 12 books altogether. They're being released every other month, and they are written by different authors. So this is the only one I'm writing in the series. Just this month, the second book came out. It's called A Picture of Hope, and it's by Liz Tolsma, who is a New York Times bestselling author. And I read that story already, and it's really, really good. And then there'll be more. Just every other month there'll be another one until all 12 have been released. So we're really excited about the series and sharing it with our readers.
But it's also your 13th novel, and so do you have something in the works from?
Oh yes.
Yeah, like that's one of those leading questions for a novelist, right? Yeah. So tell us what's next for you, Johnnie.
I'm so blessed. God's been so good. I write pretty regularly for a small publisher called Annie's Fiction, who has different series, and usually those are written by different authors too. That we write more than one book in the series. So I just finished up a book for them, and I have contracts to write 6 more books for them. So I'm already started on the next one, and then I also am part of a group called the Mosaic Collection, and we are indie authors. So I'm traditionally published and indie published. I've written one book for that collection called The Mischief Thief, and it's book number 1 in what I call my Rose and Thorn series, and I'll be writing the second book for that series, and it will come out in 2022. So lots more books to write, lots more imagining and creating I get to do over the next few months, several months.
So, Johnnie, if people want to find out about all these things that you're involved with, how do they connect with you?
Oh, I'd love for people to connect with me. My website address is Johnnie-Alexander.com, but if you Google my name, usually it pops right up. And, of course, the book, Cryptographer's Dilemma, it's available directly from barbourbooks.com and, of course, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Christian Book Distributor, all the usual online places.
Okay. So once again, I've been talking to Johnnie Alexander, who wrote The Cryptographer's Dilemma, and it's a publication of Barbour Publishing. And we certainly do thank them for giving us a copy of the book to talk about today. And Johnnie, it's been very informative and enlightening, inspirational talking with you today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And to our listeners, we appreciate you tuning in. This is Roberta Foster on the Author's Corner. Join us again next time.